It's Christmas Eve, 2022. Dan, a former sergeant now working as a teacher, is meant to be helping his wife Emmy and daughter Murray prepare for the festivities. Instead, he's on the phone, attempting to land his dream job at a laboratory, only for his application to be denied. Frustrated, he steps outside to vent his disappointment. Returning indoors, he sits beside his daughter, encouraging her to tackle what others shy away from. The family settles in to watch an important football match, but the game is abruptly interrupted by a glowing mass of smoke and electricity materializing on the pitch, from which soldiers emerge. Led by Lieutenant Hart, these newcomers reveal they are from the year 2051. They explain that Earth has been invaded by a relentless alien species known as the White Spikes, which has nearly wiped out humanity. The soldiers have traveled back in time seeking volunteers to aid in the future war. In the ensuing months, nations across the world send troops, but the demand grows insatiable, with only a fraction of volunteers ever returning. When the pool of trained soldiers runs dry, governments resort to drafting civilians, sparking civil unrest as many feel they shouldn't be forced into a conflict that lies beyond their own time. Dan continues teaching, though his students, faced with an uncertain future, struggle to find purpose in learning. His only keen student, Martin, has an avid fascination with volcanoes, eager to discuss them at every opportunity. One day, Dan receives a message notifying him of his own conscription. At the military facility, tests confirm his eligibility. He's informed he'll likely die within 7 years anyway. Suddenly, he feels a sharp pain as a metal device is fastened onto his arm, his tracking link for the future deployment. After 7 days on the mission, it will bring him back. He breaks the news to Emmy, who immediately suggests they run away. Dan points out that the government tracker prevents escape. Desperate, Emmy urges him to seek help from his estranged father, James, who left Dan as a child. Reluctantly, Dan swallows his pride and approaches James, but suspicion and mistrust lead to an argument, forcing Dan to leave, the tracker still firmly in place. Returning home, Dan promises his family he'll return. The next day at the training facility, he bonds with Charlie, a scientist, and Dorian, a veteran on his third draft. Their brief training covers firearms and first aid, followed by an explanation of the time travel mechanism, likened to 2 points along a moving river, anchored between 2022 and 2051, with no control over other time points. During a rest period, an unexpected alarm signals their departure. Although they were meant to have 7 days to train, the urgent need for assistance in the future leaves no choice. As they are pulled through the time link, the transport goes awry, and they materialize high above Miami, plummeting down. Those lucky enough to land in a pool survive, only to emerge and find the city in ruins. A colonel contacts them, informing them that Miami has been overtaken by White Spikes and will soon be bombed. Their immediate mission is to rescue a trapped research team in a nearby laboratory. Recognizing Dan's military experience, the colonel places him in charge. As Dan leads the group through the devastated city, they come upon scenes of horror and destruction. In the lab, they find a dead alien, prompting Dorian to take one of its claws as a trophy. Deeper inside, they locate the research team, only to discover them dead in an alien ambush. The colonel directs them to recover all research data and hurry, as White Spikes are likely nearby. Just as they gather the documents, a team member hears a noise above. They catch their first sight of a White Spike as it fires deadly spikes, killing one of their group. Although the alien's thick hides resist bullets, the team's shots at least slow them down, allowing them to retreat towards an exit. Dan stays back to defend the others, using a fire axe, which proves largely ineffective. Dorian intervenes, revealing that only the neck and belly are vulnerable. With White Spikes in pursuit, they rush down the streets and spot a tank approaching for extraction, only for the aliens to reach and destroy it first. Forced to fight on, the team searches for cover as more members fall. They take shelter in a tunnel, where Dan risks his life to pull a fallen trainee to safety. 2 members volunteer to stay behind, providing cover for the rest, just as airstrikes finally decimate the area. Hours later, Dan and Charlie awaken at an operating base in the Dominican Republic, where they learn that only Dorian survived among their original team. Dorian, who is terminally ill, criticizes Dan's decision to stop for the injured, reminding him that in this war, survival is a personal choice. Their conversation is interrupted when Dan is summoned to meet the commanding colonel. Upon recognizing her surname, Dan is astonished to realize the colonel is Murray, now a scientist and leader of the R Force she established. She reveals her purpose in bringing Dan to the future, not for a reunion, but for his help. She plays footage of a female White Spike, more aggressive and rare than the males, and highly defended as their reproductive source. Murray's toxin has proven effective against males, but the female white spikes have shown immunity. She asks Dan to join the mission to capture a female specimen to improve the toxin and target the species' primary source of survival. En route to the nest via helicopter, Maury recounts the alien's sudden appearance in Russia in 2048, bypassing all satellite and radar detection, and consuming humanity as food. Dan, seeking closure, asks about his own fate in her timeline, but Maury brushes it off, insisting it's best left unsaid. They reach the nest to find soldiers struggling to restrain the female white spike. The creature fights back fiercely, killing many. Maury seizes an opportunity, landing a shot on its neck, allowing the others to restrain it and prevent its escape. Finding herself ensnared, the female alien cries out for her guardians, and shortly, the area is inundated with extraterrestrial beings. As the female attempts to assault Maury, Dan descends and opens fire on as many aliens as possible before joining the others in the nest to assist in rescuing his daughter. Together, the soldiers force the female into a cage and into a helicopter, but the male aliens retaliate, targeting the helicopters in a bid to rescue her, even causing one to plummet from the sky. Dan and Maury rush to a jeep, firing at the aliens to provide the helicopters with a chance to flee with the cage. Subsequently, the pair speeds away to escape the tumultuous scene. They pause at a beach to launch an SOS flare, and Maury chastises Dan for acting impulsively. Dan is merely trying to shield her, but Maury doubts his intentions and explains that he abandoned the family at the age of 12 due to the crushing weight of unfulfilled aspirations. When she turned 16, Dan suffered a car accident, and Maury was at the hospital when he succumbed. This revelation wounds Maury, leaving Dan speechless as he grapples with the realization that he has become like his father. Suddenly, it dawns on him that he might understand James's sentiment when he spoke of the war plunging him into a dark mental state. The female white spike is transported to a fortified offshore oil platform, where the time machine is housed. She is restrained and administered a substantial dose of sedatives every hour. Dan and Maury collaborate to analyze the alien's DNA in an attempt to uncover how she withstands the toxin that would otherwise be lethal. This extensive endeavor takes several days but also allows them to reconnect and engage in amiable conversations over shared meals. On the eve of Dan's departure, he tells Maury how proud he is of her and that her mother would have been equally proud. Dan tries to persuade Maury that she ought to rest and to delegate more tasks to him, as he is meant to assist, after all. Maury seizes the opportunity to clarify why she brought him here. Once she discovers a means to create a more potent toxin, he must return to the past to mass-produce it, preparing for the impending alien arrival. That's why she's been working tirelessly to complete it before his departure. Dan is reluctant to leave Maury to face certain death, but she emphasizes that she called him because he is the only person she can trust. At that moment, the machine successfully produces a toxin with a perfect match for a female white spike, but it is also the instant the alien awakens and calls for her protectors. As a horde of male aliens arrives to assault the platform, Dan believes they should eliminate the female to halt the onslaught, yet Maury insists they possess only a single sample of the toxin, which could be more beneficial in the past. While the soldiers defend the platform to the best of their ability, with numerous aliens crashing into the labs, Maury and Dan navigate the platform, striving to reach the helipad in time for Dan's time jump, which is imminent. The duo shoots countless aliens en route, but Maury is struck by a spike. Dan attempts to assist her in walking, but she is in excruciating pain, and the platform is on the verge of collapsing due to the aliens crashing a ship against it. Maury apologizes for her previous coldness towards Dan, and after professing her love for him, she hands him the toxin, urging him to take it back to save everyone. Suddenly, an alien appears and drags Maury down with it, prompting Dan to leap after her to rescue her. However, this is precisely when the time machine activates, and the time link transports Dan, Dorian, Charlie, and the others back to the past. Fortunately, the toxin remains intact in Dan's grasp, and the vial does not shatter. Charlie is unharmed, yet he admits he concealed himself like a coward. Dan tells Hart that they need to mass-produce the toxin and send it to the future to eliminate all the aliens, but Hart has troubling news. The time machine has ceased functioning, likely due to the aliens at the oil platform having destroyed the other end of it. They can no longer return, meaning their mission is at an end. Dan goes home, struggling to believe he is reunited with his family once more. He is still in shock from the experiences he endured. At night, he is restless, frequently checking on Maury to confirm she is alive. When Emmy checks on him, Dan recounts the events involving older Maury and remains resolute in his quest to find a solution. Emmy helps him to assess the facts. They know the aliens strike Russia in 2048, yet no one witnesses the ship's arrival. Perhaps that marks the year they begin to mobilize, but they arrive earlier, unnoticed because it occurs in the midst of a frozen wasteland in Russia. Therefore, they must investigate years prior to that. The following day, Dan springs into action without delay. He visits Dorian and persuades him that their fight is not yet over. Then they take Dorian's trophy claw to the laboratory where Charlie works. Charlie confirms that there is sediment on the claw resembling volcanic ash, which could have originated from either China or Korea. They are baffled by how Asian ash could end up in Russia, prompting the need to consult a volcanology expert. Dan subsequently meets his student Martin, who explains that there was a significant volcanic eruption in Asia thousands of years ago. If the ash was blown by the wind, it could have settled in Russian waters, ultimately becoming ice. This implies that the creatures have always existed on Earth, frozen beneath countless layers of ice, hence, they never witnessed the ships arrive. The reason they awaken in 2048 is that's when climate change finally completes the melting of the polar ice caps. They present this theory to the government, but lacking concrete evidence, they are denied the resources needed to locate the alien nest. They must resort to illegal means, and Dan knows just the right individual, his father, James, who has been living off the grid for years and possesses his own aircraft. Hearing Dan say, "I require your assistance," convinces James to aid in the mission, regardless of how outrageous it sounds. Dan also reaches out to Hart, who collaborated with Maury in the future and is eager to fulfill her cherished leader's mission. Hart arrives with a few soldiers, an arsenal of weapons, and several vials of the toxin. The team journeys to Russia, and Charlie promises this time he will not hide. Upon reaching the Academy of Sciences glacier, they begin to scour the area for any signs of abnormalities. They halt when they discover their devices are malfunctioning due to a peculiar magnetic field enveloping them. Utilizing an array of explosives, the team breaches the ground and descends into an ancient cavern, where they finally uncover the frozen spaceship. Dan notes that entering the craft is extraordinarily perilous and suggests reporting their findings to the government, but the consensus is that the government has been ineffectual and it falls upon them to rectify the situation. They employ a chainsaw to slice through the ice, and the team enters the vessel, leaving Charlie and James outside as a precaution against any potential escapees. The group reaches the cockpit, realizing this is a crash site. The aliens never intended Earth to be their destination. To their astonishment, the pilot's body is not that of a white spike. Venturing into another compartment, they find the actual white spikes encased within a series of biopods, leading them to conclude they are cargo, bioengineered entities employed by the pilot's alien race as weapons for colonizing other worlds. The team commences injecting the pods with the toxin, witnessing the white spikes thrash in agony, confirming the toxin's lethal effect on them. However, their wailing rouses the aliens that have not yet been injected, resulting in them breaking free from their pods and launching an assault. The team fires at as many as they can, but a number of them manage to evade capture. Dorian insists they have no option but to destroy the ship, handing Dan his claw and choosing to remain behind to detonate the bomb once everyone has evacuated. James begins firing at the escaping aliens, but Charlie's weapon jams, compelling him to utilize the chainsaw against the creatures. Dan makes it outside and warns the others to flee as Hart and the others are engulfed by a vast swarm of aliens. Unable to hold off any longer, Dorian detonates the bomb, bringing all the creatures down with him, perishing on his own terms, as he desired. Dan, Charlie, and James escape the cavern just before the explosion engulfs them, but James reveals he saw an alien with a crimson belly escape. Dan realizes that it is the female, so they separate to pursue her. The Queen encounters one of them and attacks, but it turns out to be a snowman clad in clothes that James set up as a trap. When the Queen turns her attention to him instead, Dan arrives to strike her with his snowmobile. Father and son then open fire together until they force the Queen over the edge of the cliff. They are aware she is not dead yet and prepare for her return. When the Queen strikes again, she separates them, then shoots a spike at Dan before pursuing him. Dan utilizes that same spike to impale her mouth, and James seizes the moment to strike her with an axe, rendering her blind. The Queen begins thrashing about in desperation, and Dan seizes the opportunity to inject the toxin into her leg. However, the Queen tears off that leg to prevent the toxin from disseminating throughout her body. When the Queen attempts to pursue Dan, he readies a grenade, prepared to take her down with him. At that moment, James raises his injured hand, enticing the alien with the scent of his blood and diverting its attention towards him instead. Dan refuses to lose his father after their reunion, so he leaps onto the Queen, slashing her neck with Dorian's claw. After striking her several more times, he retrieves the last vial of toxin and inserts it into her mouth before kicking her down the cliff once more. The Queen crashes against a large rock and finally meets her demise. The following day, news outlets worldwide broadcast reports of an explosion in Russia that claimed the lives of numerous aliens, with the government attempting to take credit for the event. Dan returns home, reuniting with his family and finally allowing James to meet his granddaughter. Together, they can now strive for a brighter future. Make sure to subscribe and hit the notification button so that you don't miss any of our video updates.